Easter is coming, and I dread it for the sermons that we're going to hear. The preacher will say things like this. Christ said, let this cup pass from me. Let this cup pass from me. Let this cup pass from me. And they say then, they usually go on and say, in his omniscience, he looked forward and he saw the cat of nine tails coming across his back. He saw the crown of thorns and the mockery. He saw the nails in his hands and his feet, and it caused him to sweat as though great drops of blood. Well, let me tell you something. The physical agony of Christ was absolutely essential in the atonement, and I'll take nothing away from it, but if that's all you tell your people, you are not telling them about Calvary. And I'll prove it for the next 3 centuries. Read everything you can on martyrdom. The little disciples, the little sheep of Jesus, were carried off to crosses. Some of them crucified upside down, some of them set on fire. And yet the history of martyrdom tells us that they went to those crosses with their chest out, playing the man, singing hymns, counting it a majestic privilege to die like their Lord. So are you telling me the champion of their salvation is now cowering in a garden? What was in the cup? Psalm 75. For a cup is in the hand of the Lord, and the wine foams. It is well mixed, and he pours out of this. Surely all the wicked of the earth must drain and drink down its dregs. Jeremiah agrees. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, he says to me, take this cup of the wine of wrath from my hand and cause all the nations to whom I send you to drink it. They will drink and stagger and go mad because of the sword that I will send among them. Think, preachers, you oftentimes assume too much. That your people understand the cross, but I can tell you, all over the world, I've had people come up to me in tears and say, Brother Washer, for 15 years I have rolled upon Christ, I have trusted Christ, but I never could figure out in all this preaching how the fact that Romans and Jews beat him up somehow atoned for my sin, but tonight I understand. He was crushed. It pleased the Lord to crush him. To crush him. Imagine you're in a little village and you're just an eighth of a mile away from a dam, and you're at the very bottom of that dam on a river, and the dam is 1,000 miles high and 1,000 miles wide, and it's filled to the brim. And one morning you wake up to a sound like the world cracking in two, and you run to the window of your house and you see that the dam is broke and a wall of water higher than heaven is coming toward you. Your strength of stroke doesn't matter. How fleet of foot you are does not avail you. You are going to die, and no one will hear from that moment, know your name. You will be gone. You will be removed from this earth. And before that mighty wave hits you, the ground opens up and drinks it down, so that not one spot of water reaches your sock. So did Christ, our mighty champion, on Calvary, take our sin and bear the wrath of Almighty God. And I hear men say this is cosmic child abuse. My heart, I don't know whether to cry or go to battle. It is the most precious truth to me, because my sins are so high that only a work like that can save me.
I don't understand, no man that ever preached understands how God was contracted to a span, incomprehensibly made man. How the heaven of heavens cannot contain God, and yet is pressed into the matrix of the Virgin Mary. I don't understand how the Ancient of Days became a babe. I don't understand how he whose life had to begin his life all over there in the womb of the woman. I don't understand he that gave life everything, hangs on his mother's breast for sustenance every day. I do not understand how God became man. As Wesley says, God contracted to a span, incomprehensibly made man. But less do I understand how he became sin for us. What does he say? Father, if it be possible, may this cup pass away from me. But if I drink it, then thy will be done. What was in that cup? David was telling me today that in his meeting, I think it was a Sunday night, he felt led to say that they're such a big crowd. I'm going to preach there next month. It's a wonderful tabernacle there in Brooklyn Tabernacle. Seats about 1,500. And it was packed, and there were 300 or 400 people outside. David took a box and went and preached to them outside, and a number, about 14 or 15, ran out to get saved. Then he went indoors, and he said, before I preach, I want to say this, that God right now is moving me to say this, that somebody here hasn't been sleeping for a night or two. Who is it? And he said, a young man just ran down the aisle full speed, and he said, look, I'm a leader of the communist youth here in New York. I'm a leader of the gay people and all the sex perversion. And he said, I heard it 2 nights ago, and I haven't slept a wink for 2 nights. And he just fell down and hollered and cried and wept and groaned that God would save him. He had a real old-fashioned baptism of repentance. Now, all that corruption was in that cup. He became sin for us. A man called Adam opened the door and he let the stream in, you know, little stream, and it's like going up to Minneapolis and you can stride just like that. You can stride over the Mississippi River because it begins there. But look at it when you get down to New Orleans, the size of it. By one man's disobedience, sin entered into the world, and death because of sin. And every sin that you can name, the vulgar, vile, wretched, rotten stuff, David was telling me about some other things that are unmentionable. And they were all in that cup. I've told a story before, I'll tell you again. In the largest church I pastored, I was in my 20s, and it was at the Tabernacle in Oldham outside of Manchester. And going down the street one day, it was 5 minutes of 5, I remember, and as I went past the door of this very humble kind of place, this lady put her head out and said, I know who you are, you're the pastor at the Tabernacle. I said, that's right. I've been to the Tabernacle, I usually sit at the back. I'm very poor, and I can't have anything to put in your offering. I said, all right. And she said, you come in my house and have a cup of tea. I said, no, I'm sorry, it's 5 minutes of 5, and I'm due for tea, as we say in England, or supper at 5 o'clock. No, that's not the reason. That's not the reason. You won't be coming because I'm poor. And it isn't a nice house like some of your folk. I'll come in. I went in. Kind of a house you go in and hold your nose as you go in, you know. I've been in some pigsties of a house, but never one like that, I'll tell you that. I sat down at the table, and there was just about this much space to get from the door, the front door, and it was all stacked up with books. She bought them at a junk shop down the road. She'd read thousands of them. The table was full. And there's a little space at the sink, and then there was a big sink. It was piled up with dishes. She hadn't had a washing up of dishes, I'm sure, for months. And there's a nice piece of bacon, and it was all green and moldy, you know. A real appetizing kind of thing. She said, you do drink tea? I said, yes. She said, all right. And she had a teapot that had been white once, and it was all messed up on the outside, and she reached in the sink and took a cup out that was all slimy on the outside, and as I looked in, it had tea leaves and some corruption in the bottom. And she just took that black tea and she poured it in that cup. And she said, do you take cream? I said, yes, I do. She said, I don't have any. Do you take sugar? Yeah, I don't have any. You know, as she held, her fingernails were all in mourning. They were covered with dirt, and she held that filthy cup out with that rotten, cold tea, with no sugar, no cream, no anything. And I looked at it, and I guess I shrunk off from it, you know, and she said, drink it. You know, as I put my hand out to take that cup, right there, I've never forgotten it. My mind just went 2,000 miles away from England to a place called, at that time, Palestine, and 2,000 years back to this man in the garden when the Father said, drink it. Drink it. Well, that's enough to lay us out, surely. He's the essence of purity. He's the essence of holiness. He was harmless and undefiled and separate from sinners, and yet he takes the most horrible thing this world has ever had, symbolic of all the sin of all the ages. You can mention it, all the physical corruption, lesbianism, every lousy, rotten, corrupt thing that sends men to jail, that makes men rot in their bodies. Every vicious thing, the pride and the anger and all the other things, the sins of the flesh, the sins of the spirit, and they're all there, and he took that cup. There was nobody there to sustain him. Except, of course, again, the Father. And the men that he trained were all lying around snoring. That's the thing that got to me the more I studied it, the more I meditated over it today. Don't blame them. For heaven's sake, don't criticize those disciples. They never had a volume of 66 books on the lap. They were still doubtful in their minds. I'm sure that he would rise from the dead. What kind of a judgment do you think the church is going to have when we get to the judgment seat with all the knowledge we have and all the light we have and all the versions we have? A lot of these meetings where we just clapped and had a marvelous time and sat down and went home and couldn't remember the text or what had happened, all we had was a hullabaloo time that stirred our emotions, they look pretty sick at the judgment seat, I think.
When we sin against the Almighty Creator of the universe, the Maker of heaven and earth. And here's the kicker. Though he should have killed me in my sleep for what I thought, said, and did on yesterday, yet by his grace, he has allowed me to live another day.
He hath made the earth by his power. He hath established the world by his wisdom, and hath stretched out the heavens by his discretion. When he uttereth his voice, there is a multitude of waters in the heavens, and he causeth the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He maketh lightnings with rain, and bringeth forth the wind out of his treasures.